This is a demonstration to illustrate how to use a conditional statement in the context of validating a record to be updated in an Access database. First of all, we'll create a blank database and we'll call this validate because it is using a conditional statement to validate the fields inside a form. Once we get into the database, we will create a very simple table. We'll call this table user because it keeps track of data of individual users. And then we'll create a simple table with first name, last name, and we'll also include birth year. Okay, but birth year is not a text field. Instead, it is a number field because it's going to store a number. Once we create the user table, we'll close this form, but before we have to make sure that we update the database. And then what we'll do is create a form to perform data entry with the table we just created. So click Create on the ribbon, go to More Forms, and click Form Wizard. The Form Wizard does a fairly good job creating, a default form for a table. First of all, we have to select what fields or what columns should appear in the form. We'll select everything first, and then we'll put ID back because we should not be able to edit the ID field. It is automatically generated and should not be editable. Then we click Next. We'll choose the default columnar format. Click Next again. I just choose none for the style. You can choose any style that you want. And then we want to have a title for this particular form. So we'll just say this is data entry for users. And then we click Finish. And this is the form. Now the form is not very, it's not well designed, but that's not really our main point here. So I'm going back to the design view, and what I want to do is to say if the birth year is outside of a particular range, we'll flag the user and say this is invalid. What you need to do first is to click outside of the main area of the form, which is kind of like this portion here. Just click anywhere below form footer. And that will basically select the form itself, or of course you can use the drop down box here to click form itself and take a look at the event under the form. The one that we are particularly interested in is called before update. Before update as an event happens as immediately before access is going to update the table in the database. In other words, it gives us the last chance to perform any type of validation. So we'll click the dot 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 next to before update and double click code builder, which opens up a VBA window. So what we'll do is we're going to say if birth year dot value, if it is, let's say, less than 1900, okay, so we're not expecting anyone to have a birth year of less than 1900, or birth year dot value is greater than 2009, then we want to flag the user and say that this birth year does not seem to make any sense. Now, in a real application, you should not use the constant 1900 and the constant 2009. Instead, you should get the year, the current year, and then subtract the maximum age that you can expect for any person from the current year to perform the boundary checking. But since that's not the main focus of this particular program, we'll just hard code it. The first thing you should do is to create a message box to tell the user what is wrong with the form. So we'll use MSG box for that purpose. And all you have to do is to enter the error message itself. In this particular case, because everything is hard coded, we can just say birth year should be between 1900 and 2009. End quote. And paren. The next line is even more important because somehow we have to tell Access whether to go ahead and update the table or whether we should just leave it back whether we should go back and tell the user that this particular form or the data of this form is not valid and the user needs to change that before Access can take it into the table. So to do that, we use cancel and we say cancel equals true, which is telling Access to cancel the update operation. Do not change the table in the database. Cancel is not a variable, it is called a parameter because we can see that cancel appears here inside the parentheses right after the name of the subroutine. This is called a parameter. We will talk about parameters and subroutines later on in this course. But for now, we'll just say that we use this cancel to stop the update. We can close the VBA window. Now we switch back to the form and then we switch to form view so that we can actually run the form. We'll specify a particular name here, so we can specify John Doe, and when we specify the birth year, let's go ahead and pick something that is inside of that range. We can specify, let's say 1950 right there, and when you click the next record button, if everything validates just fine, it will just create this one row in the table and proceed to the next one, just like what we have here. On the other hand, if we enter something that does not make any sense, let's say we have a Jane Doe and the birth year is 1890, okay? According to our logic, this should not be a valid birth year. So when we click next record, the code kicks in and it performs the validation check and it decides that the birth year should be between 1900 and 2009. It prints out the error message, and after we click OK, you can see that the number of records did not change, which basically means this record is not was not written to the database. So our validation check worked. You can also change the birth year to say 2010, which is 1 year after this year, and according to our validation check, this is also invalid. So this is a pretty easy way to put validation code into a data entry form so that you can perform the last chance perform a validation check right before Access is about to update the database. That's it for this particular demonstration. Thanks for watching.